So welcome everybody to today's webinar, Getting Started with SMART, a Science Teacher's Journey. My name is Kendall Havenstein. I'm the SMART Marketing and Operations Manager for SMART Australia New Zealand. I'll be today's co-host. I'll be here supporting the presenter in the background. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping slides and then I'm going to hand it over to today's presenter, and then I'll be back at the end to do a quick wrap up. Okay, so first things first, how to use your control panel. It's pretty straightforward. You can shrink it down if it's in the way, just by clicking on the white and orange arrow at the top on the left. It'll shrink it down to just that grey little panel with all the symbols, and if you want to pop it back out, just click on that again. If you have any questions throughout, I'll be here to answer them. You can just type them into the question underneath the question section, just click on the arrow next to questions, that'll pop it out. You can even click on this little symbol here, that the square with the arrow in the left corner, and that actually pulls it completely out of the control panel, and it can be separate if that's easier for you that way. If you don't get an answer straight away, that just means it might mean that I'm saving it up to the end when we will have a question and answer segment at the end, where you'll be able to ask the presenter directly. So I may be saving it up to the end, or I know that your question is going to get answered as the presenter's presentation unfolds. So at the end, during the live question and answer segment, you can actually come off mute to ask a question. If you just put your hand up, I can then take you off mute. I'll just be moderating the questions that way. And I can actually see that someone already has a question. Oh, hi. Hey, Maha. Hope you're having a lovely afternoon. Thanks for coming along. And so next we have your attendance certificate. So if you can earn an attendance certificate for this webinar, so if you log into training.smarttech.com, click on the blue certification box in the middle and then navigate to this webinar. It will pop out to a library of all our webinars if you just navigate to this one and then click on the Mark Complete button at the end. And then it should generate you a PDF certificate as long as you're signed into your train.smarttech.com account. So if you did attend last week, I only just sent out the email from last week's webinar, only about 45 minutes ago or so. So I normally get them out within a week. I normally do my best to get them out on the Monday, Tuesday following the live session, but sometimes it does slip over to Wednesday. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that slide, and I would now like to introduce today's presenter, Toya Smith, science teacher. Her experience includes 7 years teaching in a primary school at Long Street Primary School, Whyalla, South Australia. She has experience as a classroom and specialist teacher and is currently teaching Science Foundation Year 7 and is a SMART certified trainer. And if you would like to contact Toya, you can do so. Her contact information is just below her bio pic there. You've got her email, toya.smith216@schools.sa.edu.au. And I would now like to hand it over to today's presenter, who I believe it is actually just started hailing over in South Australia. So are you there, Toya?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
I'll just hand over the screen share. Okay, you should be able to see your screen now, Toya.
Yes, can you see my screen? I hope so. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Like Kendall said, I am a primary school teacher in South Australia, and it has literally just started and then immediately stopped bucketing down. I would like to start today's presentation with a quick acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge and show respect to the Bangala people, who are the traditional custodians of the ancestral lands here in Whyalla, which is where I'm presenting. I would also like to acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment that the Bangala feel towards the land and to the sea. So today's webinar, the purpose of today's webinar, I guess, is to share my knowledge as a teacher from knowing nothing about SMART to becoming a hopefully certified educator really soon. The process is going to be that I'm going to share information on how you go from being fearful of technology to using it for improving student engagement and success. And the payoff for you is that it's going to hopefully inspire you as educators to have a go at something new, no matter what your history with that particular thing is. So I guess I'll start off as a little bit of background from me. The first thing I want to say is that I am a former technophobe. Basically, I was the kid throughout all of high school, all of my university, who would shout down to my sister and say, come fix my computer for me, it's not working, it's broken, and she would come and press a button and it would magically do what I wanted it to do. And I have, come a very long way from that point. So now I'm actually my site's technology go-to in terms of I'm the girl who goes and presses a few buttons and everyone goes, oh my God, thank you for fixing that for me. So it's been a bit of a journey from those 2 points, and it all started, I guess, with being handballed a project in my current site where we got iPads and they were being remotely managed, and I was just kind of told I was going to be the girl on the ground, and that changed to being the person who was running the whole program. And then my journey from that point was we started with 30 iPads, we went to 200 and something iPads across our whole site, and then probably about this time last year, I offered my help with helping replace the interactive whiteboards that we had on our site. And I went from offering to help get quotes to being the lead of that project. And that took me down a path, I guess, where I started out doing a little bit of research into what is available these days, because the boards we had just weren't cutting it. In the time I've worked at this site, I've never once seen them be interactive. And so they were in desperate need of replacement. And that, from all of the quotes and things that I got for our site, I was then able to do the consultation process with all of my colleagues and all of the other teachers on site and ask them what it was they wanted from new boards, present that information to my principal and my finance manager, who asked me, what do you recommend? What do you think? What are you liking? At which point I said, I like these ones. And these ones were the smart boards. So that was where it all began, I guess, for me in terms of my connection with smart tech. So from there, we go to being a smart newbie. For me, it started off with the initial process of purchasing, getting the boards installed and doing a demonstration, at which point I could then start showing the teachers at my site what they actually can do. And all the teachers were like, oh my God, this is incredible. And then in terms of using them as a teacher, for me, it started off with my step one, which was to choose a guinea pig class. My guinea pig class, I guess, was a group of year 6, 7s. They're kids that I've had previously, so they're kids that I thought would be a good group to start with. And then from there, I needed to log on to Smart Online Learning, which is now the Lumio, and just make a lesson. And then from there, I needed to hope that it all works. So the lesson that I made was just a bit of an introductory lesson on extreme weather. Hopefully my screen's changed over so that you can now see the screen that I'm looking at. This was the lesson that I started. It was very basic for me. I only made it using the online learning suite. I hadn't heard of, known about, or worked with the notebook at this point. So this was very, very early this year, term 1. I did a really basic shout it out, for which this is refreshed so it won't have their responses on it, but for which the question was for them to name natural disasters that they know of. And then we moved on, we did a bit of a true and false response task. I played a video, and then I had one of the templates up, and I just got them to copy this into their books, basically use their iPads that they were working off of and find the definitions for these vocab words, which then I went through on the board. And then we did another shout it out at the end, which was a bit of a, okay, so what do we think? Putting some things into categories. For me, this was about playing with the technology that Smart could offer. I didn't know anything about it, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to have a bit of a play, because I knew that I needed to train up all of the other staff on my site. Having being the person who chose these boards, it was my responsibility to teach everybody else how to use them. So that's what I did. Had a bit of a play, and then from there, I had a few lessons learned. So for me, lesson number one is that the internet is absolutely brilliant when it works. We had some issues with getting 30 iPads connected to the whiteboard, to the Smart Online Learning Suite all at the same time. The kids also didn't know how to find the web browser instead of Google, which was also great. And I had intended on screen sharing my iPad so I could show them what I was doing on my iPad to my board, but I hadn't realized at that point that I needed the screen share app and I couldn't just share away. So that didn't work. And there was a few technical difficulties for that first lesson. I also learnt that students can actually be really silly on iPads in class, and they will push every single limit. I chose this particular group of children because I thought they would be ones that knew my expectations. I've taught them all as a classroom teacher before. They know my rules. And so I just kind of went, you guys know where I'm at, you know my expectations, let's go. And that was a big mistake and a bit of a boo-boo on my part, because they pushed every button, they were silly, they used the wrong apps, they used the iPads inappropriately. I ended up taking iPads off of a number of the students. So lesson number two was that I needed to be much more explicit in my instructions and also explicit in exactly what the expectations was. For me, it was not just setting my expectations, but not just saying, okay, go onto this website. It didn't work. It was a complete failure, and it's just as well I'd only made a very, very small lesson because I thought that there would be a few lessons learned. One of the perks of being a specialist teacher is that, oh, hang on, no, sorry. So if we go back, sorry, I'll take a step back. It's the first thoughts for me in terms of the technology, and what I liked about the technology were that once we were in and on and everything was working, the kids' engagement in my lesson improved tenfold. They were all about it. They wanted to know what was happening. Once they figured out that this was how we were doing the lesson and that it was all, you know, interactive based, they wanted to know more about it. All of a sudden, for me, I couldn't stop thinking about the potential of the technology for my students. So once I'd gotten that initial reaction from the kids and I got the, oh, what's this? This is really cool, miss. How do we do this? What's this for? What are we doing here? My brain wouldn't stop. And then for weeks after, my kids started walking in, especially that group started walking into my class going, are we doing the iPad lesson today? Are we doing that Hello Smart thing today? Which showed to me that they were really super into it and engaged, which was so helpful. And then, especially in terms of using the online platform, it's so easy to use. Now that I know a little bit more in our notebook, which I'll talk about more later, that one's really easy to use as well. But really basic beginning point, the Smart Online platform was so easy. It's just go in, whip up a lesson, and away you go. So here we go. Perk of being a specialist teacher for me is that I do get a redo. I get to pick a different class who've never seen the technology before, and I can fix my mistakes based on what I noticed in that first lesson. So I did that. I chose a group of 5 6s to do an online lesson with. And this time I got the board set up before my lesson. I made sure that all of my technology was working, my screen was sharing everything I wanted it to do. I set much clearer expectations with my students around the use of the iPads. I set rules, I set expectations, I set the consequences with them so they knew exactly what would happen if they did the wrong thing. And then I got the students to log on to the hellosmart.com in groups. So I had most of my students rolling up their pages, getting their pages ready to go, while I was getting one small group of students to log into HelloSmart, and then once that group of students was logged in, I turned everything around and I said, right, you guys go help everybody else. And then when you're done, you can roll your books up. And it just became so much smoother and easier. And then if there was anyone who was lagging behind, I could quickly go through it with my iPad screen shared, just so that kids were helping kids and it was a much easier transition into the lesson. So this is the lesson. Hopefully, again, my screen's sharing the right screen, but this is the second lesson that I did with the group of 5, 6s. I started off with a game this time, and we actually played this game a good 4 or 5 times. And the kids just couldn't stop. They're like, can we do it again? Can we do it again? And I ended up going, no, we have to move on. Otherwise, we're just going to spend an hour playing the same thing over and over again. We did another shout it out, which I haven't refreshed this on yet. So this is the students' responses for my shout it out. For me, this was about eliciting prior learning. We hadn't started this unit yet, and I didn't know what they knew. So this was really important feedback from my kids, from me, in terms of what do they actually already know about this particular topic. And kids I gave them 3 responses each. And then we just had a general discussion as these responses popped up on the board as they typed them, in terms of, okay, so what does this mean? And what does the word change mean? And how can that look? And I got the students to draw what they know. Especially important for me because there is a lot of kids who don't necessarily have the literacy skills that they need. So for me, this was super important for them to be able to show me their knowledge in another way. So a couple of the drawings that I got here are just a couple of examples of the one. Sorry, I've just got to find the right name that I'm looking for. There she is. So just a few examples of what the kids thought they knew about this particular topic. Caterpillars to butterflies. So for me, I know that there's a misconception here in that she thinks that metamorphosis is about adaptation, when it's more about the transition and the life cycle process. So that was an area of the topic that I could make sure I touched on as we did the learning. Then we did, again, slightly more specific instructions as we went through. And this time I did a shout it out, but with these shout it outs, there was 4 in a row and each one had a different image. So the kids' responses covered up the image, but I did desert, Arctic, forest and grassland images. So I had the same question of what features they actually see, what organisms might live here and how they might survive. And it was an opportunity for the students who knew a little bit more to give me a little bit more, and the students who only used their observation skills to still interact with that lesson if they didn't necessarily know about it, which was really important for me to be able to provide those multiple entry points to this part of the lesson. And then we did a video, where we watched a video, and then again with the explicit instruction of, okay, so this is the next step for you, write something you're learning. So we're reflecting based on what they've picked up from the video. And then we did a review task at the end of this particular lesson where the students had to do 3 things they'd learned in 1 question, which again, for this particular student, she had learnt what an adaptation is, she'd learnt how they work and what mutations are, and she wonders if penguins have fur or feathers. And we've got how DNA works, how adaptations work, mutations are, and could people adapt to wildlife? So the kids really came up with some interesting questions, which was really good to see that they're showing their ability to think and learn through this platform, which again, super validating for it for me. Again, what the adaptations are about genetics and DNA, and one of the videos had the 2 different kinds of moth, and then she's asking, you know, what does this mean about adults that don't live in water and living in water? Can they adapt to those change of environments? So for me, all of that was really validating feedback from the students, and that unit actually I ended up editing and adding on to that particular unit, so it became a whole unit rather than just an individual lesson, which is another thing I loved about the technology. So that was all for term 1, and if you fast forward, I guess, towards the end of term 1, beginning of term 2 for me, some of the lessons that I'd learned through using this technology with multiple classes, going back to that first group of 6, 7s that I'd worked with, adding on to the work that I just showed you with my 5, 6s, I'd learned that you can edit and build on these lessons, and that initial lessons they turned into whole units of work for me that I now have all of the responses and all of the feedback from the students and all of their input there available. As long as I don't refresh those pages, it stays there, and I can reflect back and use that as a part of their grading, which has been incredible from a teaching perspective. I had a solid grasp of how to use the online platform, and I had started playing around with the notebook once I downloaded it and had that sorted. I figured out how to edit existing documents and PDFs and make them interactive rather than just using worksheets, which for me was super important because I really dislike just giving out worksheets. It's not something that I enjoy doing, but sometimes they have a place, and that place is really important in terms of the learning and the recording, but it's harder to develop that discussion and interaction. So in order to be able to turn those documents in interactive documents and then bring them into the discussion was so important for me in my teaching. For me, transforming my science lessons and my science learning over term 2 and now into the beginning of term 3, my smartboard has become an everyday tool for my teaching. My favourite features are the whiteboard app. I love the inbuilt templates and the widgets. Turning worksheets into interactive learning, again, like I was just saying, it's such an important part to be able to bring that discussion and interaction into that ability to also keep the recording so that I'm able to reflect back for student grading. The multi-user function so that students can use the board, so more students can use the board at once, having the 2 board pens so students can come up and record their thinking on the templates when we're not using the iPad connection is another super important thing for me, especially because the kids really like it, and you instantly, as soon as they think that they get to come up and write on the board, you've got full attention and you've got kids going, I want to, it's my turn, can I do it next? Which it just adds a level to the interaction, which is really good. And then the ability to screen share the iPads so that I can see, students can see what I'm doing, but also share their work. An example that we did the other day was we were looking at safety in chemistry and doing investigations, and I gave the students some scenarios and I asked them to act them out, and they didn't want to do it live. They wanted to record their acting out and share the recordings. So I said, yep, cool, that's fine, we'll just share your iPads to the board. So we did that. They gave them time to develop that so that they could share their understanding of the safety concerns, and then we just screen shared their iPads to the board so we could look at each other's. It saved the muss and fuss around bringing in iPads and airdropping videos and having to save the videos on things. If it's just a really quick, we're going to do it here and now, just to share understanding in this moment, screen share your iPad, it's done. There was no mess or anything about it. And again, screen sharing my iPad so I could show them what that process looked like live was really important to them understanding how they needed to do it. And by the end of the activity, all the kids had the screen share app open, ready to scan the QR code and good to go without me even having to say, you need to do this and then you need to do this. So they'd already picked it up. For me, the assessment opportunities of these boards is incredible. Science assessment can be super tricky, especially in primary school, because not all students have the literacy ability that they need in order to write and record their understandings. So I do a lot of observation-based assessment, a lot of recorded anecdotes, a lot of can you tell me the answer, and I'll just check it off a checklist that you've developed your understanding. And that can get really hard to get to all the students who need it. So for me to be able to have the assessment opportunities that I'll show you an example of in a minute was really important for me, and a big selling point for these boards when I was going through and choosing them, just because it was so incredible to be able to just go, here you go, here it is, and then get the results back straight away. And that was through using the response activities that have allowed me to work through tasks with students and get those true representations. So I've got most students doing them on their own, they're independently learning and completing work, whereas those students who might need a little bit more help are able to have my full attention, so I'm not controlling and dumbing down fires or anything with everybody else. So it's been super great. An example of this is this particular result. This is actual results from students from one of our response quizzes that we did. All of the green is all the correct ones. The document and the program actually spits out any of these ones with a particular answer, spits it out green or red already. And then all of the opinion pieces I went through myself and just highlighted green or red. And then the blue ones are like the half explained or the half get it. For me, this tells me a lot, especially if I do it 2 to 3 weeks before the end of term or before the end of a topic. I can look at this and go, okay, so a lot of students aren't quite understanding what the 2 human causes of extinction are here. We'll go through that again. Or they're not quite sure what a producer is, so I'll make sure that I recover that to make sure that that learning sticks. And then also, like with this particular student in the middle here who's just done the good old IDK, I can then go, all right, so how am I going to make sure that my students can have a go at this and actually try to give me a response rather than just, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. So that was a real, how can I make active learners out of these students for my class? So even at a snapshot, that's really good. And then you can't see it because it's not on this particular screenshot, but there's student names, their percentage, what they got right, what they got wrong. And then I just adapt that when I include the opinion pieces because they are not included in the percentage of correct answers, and immediately tells me exactly who's sitting where about in terms of their knowledge. And then I can add or build on that picture with the observations and the anecdotes that I'm getting from students. So assessment opportunities for this technology has been incredible for me as a beginner with SMART. Just recently, we in South Australia had a lockdown for end of term, week 1 this term / beginning of week 2. We had 7-day snap lockdown. And I was able to use the opportunity to do an online lesson for the first time, which was incredible. That was because students asked for it. So we went on lockdown, school finished at the end of Tuesday, and by the end of Friday, I had students logging into Teams, which is our communication platform with families at home, saying, can we do an online lesson? Can we do an online lesson? And for me, that was really affirming for the place that this holds in my teaching. But it was also really good because in our context, there's a lot of families that don't necessarily have the internet access that they need to be able to do proper online learning. So we are only providing at-home printed packs. So for students to be saying, can we come online and do a lesson with you online properly instead of doing the printed packs at home, really was, it felt good to be able to have students saying, we want to work with you, we want to have a lesson with you. So I developed a lesson, which again, I will show you. This lesson was self-paced for students. I did the changing over to student mode up in this corner here when I presented it, and I was having a video call with the students at the same time on Teams. And then it was beginning lesson for the term, so I designed it around getting their prior knowledge. I was really specific in my instructions, both in the platform itself and on Teams, because there were some students who couldn't log into Teams directly but could use the technology at home for hellosmart.com. For the students that didn't log into this, we were still able to do it at school the following week, while the other students had a follow-up task for their prior knowledge and their additional knowledge. So I had students who were able to put in their understanding. Some chose to write, some chose to type. Where is she there? So this tells me all of the things that they think they know about states of matter in general. And then again, the game, going more specific into the actual knowledge of these things, being able to present the key ideas from a video in a small snapshot kind of way for those students who were still facing it and working on it. This particular lesson was very template heavy for me, which was really important because it means that I could turn them into individual student handouts and they were still able to give me their understandings of them, which was really important. So for me, being able to do that meant that I could keep a hold of this knowledge and do what I'm doing now and review back to it. Still had the justifications, which is really important in science for me. Again, the games. And then doing some sorting and comparing. So using the Venn diagram. So not only was that really affirming for me as a teacher, but it was also meant that I could, like I said, go back. I ended up asking students for feedback on that particular task, and I said, all right, guys, at the end, just tell me what you think. Was this a helpful lesson, unhelpful? Did it go how you thought it would go? And one student wrote down all her feedback for me and said, more games would have been nice, that it was really easy to follow, but some of the tasks were a bit tricky. It was a bit hard to think. And for that kind of feedback to come back to me, that meant that the platform itself was really easy to use in terms of doing that at-home learning. But the tasks were still intellectually, you know, and cognitively, like the students still had to think and learn and use their brains and really try. And none of them tried to use Google, and none of them tried to, you know, they would say cheat, but none of them tried to kind of get around the system and be like, oh, Miss not watching me right now. They all took it at face value and said, okay, well, this is what I think I know. So it was a really helpful thing for me. So if we were to go into future lockdowns, that's something that I'll be able to offer up to all of my classes and say, this is where we're at, this is what we can do. I'll be here at this time. If you log in, you log in. Or even for other teachers to be able to have that opportunity for me to pass that on. So student success, I guess, for me, the improved assessment meant that students were able to prove their understanding for me in terms of using SMART in my classroom. It's been really important. The games have meant that students are getting the concepts a lot quicker and they're remembering content. That can we play it again? Can we play it again? Is enjoyable for the students, and I get that, but it's also then taking in the learning and making those matchups in the match it up game more and more and building those bridges within their cognitive thinking. And the greater engagement meant that students are just able to take in the content in general, which has been incredible. For the student engagement side of things, students were disinterested and disengaged. They are paying better attention. They are wanting the iPad, which is super helpful in terms of getting them to be interested in the learning that I'm giving them. There's greater opportunities for me to differentiate to students' needs and to lead to more engaged learners that way. Having the multiple entry points and the multiple opportunities for students to show their knowledge has been so rewarding. And then, of course, there's the opportunities to use another platform for learning has meant that there's more completed work. All of a sudden you give a student an iPad and they want to do the work that you give them, which is something I will tap into. So I guess the so what for me out of all of this has been the realization that I should always trust my own abilities. The opportunity to improve my practice has definitely outweighed my concerns, I guess, about not getting it right or getting it wrong or making great big mistakes. Is giving me the opportunity to pass my own knowledge and learning on to others in multiple ways. So for me, I am responsible for training up all of the other staff at my school. And so that's giving me the opportunity to run local PDs. It's giving me the opportunity to do this, which is not something I'd ever thought I would do in my career. It's giving me the opportunity to further my own abilities and my own training through my participation in the SMART Certified Trainer course, which is something that I'm hoping to have complete by the end of this term. It helps my students at the centre of what I'm doing, and it helps keep them there. For me, if I were to go home and start a lesson or to plan a lesson, I would check it against the Australian Curriculum Achievement Standards and go, yep, that meets that, and then away we go. But for this, it's not just about meeting the standards, it's about meeting the students, it's about making sure the students are engaged, it's about making sure that students are where they need to be, and it's a check back ability for me. So it's about making sure I can have kids doing the work at the work where they need to be, which has been really valuable. And I guess overall, my journey to this point has been a really, not a long one, but it's been a really big learning curve for me, especially because my students are at points where they're all at different points, and it's been a really big learning curve to be able to use technology to bring them all into the same point, and also to go from being that technophobe teacher to being the teacher that's the go-to. The smart technology and using this and incorporating it into my everyday teaching has been a huge part of that for me, especially because it's been about challenging my own practice, challenging my own thinking, challenging my own abilities, and really trying to see how I can change the way I approach teaching and learning within my own space, which has been, yeah, really affirming, I guess. Other than that, I don't really know where I'm going to go from here. I know that at the end of this year, I'm leaving this site, and I am hopefully going to be at a site. I'm pretty sure that my new site has the new boards, so I'm hoping I can continue using the technology. Other than that, I'm hoping that I can continue my relationship with SMART. So yeah, finished a little bit earlier than I thought I was going to today. Sorry about that, Kendall, but I think that's, I guess, where I'm at with that one. That's where I am. It's my journey. I'm afraid it's all I've got. It's only been doing it for 2 terms and 4 weeks.
No, it was great. It was, I particularly enjoyed listening to your journey, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. We had one comment come in. Thank you, awesome webinar from, I'm not sure if I can read that name, Tagahala from South Auckland. So he's had that comment come through.
Thank you.
So that was cool. Someone from South Auckland. So that, I actually have a question for you. So if anybody else has any questions, please type them in now. Yes, Maha's just put in a comment. Yes, what a great journey. It really was. It's really like, because obviously, especially for me, once the technology is put into the schools, I don't often hear what happens. So it was super interesting for me to hear all that, because I often think, wow, I know about what happens, oh wow, I know that school just got 50 boards or whatever. I think I always think, I wonder how it's going. So that was really interesting to hear that journey. And thank you for coming forward, because I know you're new, brand new to SMART. Yes. So thank you for coming in. Posting. Yeah, thank you for coming forward and doing that in the very early days. I know that must be thinking, oh my God, what could I have to offer? But honestly, that was great. And Maha's just said thank you again. So I have a quick question for you. So how do you think it would have gone with with the snap lockdowns in South Australia? How do you think it would have gone, the transition to remote learning, with the technology that you had in place before SMART? How do you think that?
We didn't have any technology in place where we could have done this. It would have just been, here's your printed at home stuff, here's your worksheets, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're not in a position where we know that we've got kids who have reliable internet or kids who have a device each. A lot of our families would have 4 or 5 kids and 1 iPad. So in order to get kids doing that, we have connections with families, so we have teams, and all of our families, well, maybe half to 3/4 of our families are connected to our teams. Other than that, it would be phone calls from teachers' home just to make sure that everyone's doing okay. But yeah, it would have been, here's a video, try this experiment, or here, chatting just in a chat situation, not in a interactive, here's the actual lesson kind of situation.
So you would have been completely disconnected from the kids. That's what I'm hearing.
Other than being able to say hi everyone and doing a post on Teams every day in our, all of my classes teams. That's about it.
Yeah. And
so,
not only are they disconnected. Yeah. So not only are they disconnected from you. Yeah, you say. Yeah. You go.
Sorry, I was just going to say, unless I decided to do video chats with the kids, but again, that depends on who could attend and who could get a device that they could attend a video chat with.
Yeah, and I guess I know in high school, like trying to do video chats with every individual chats with every student, like that's huge. That's a huge workload for you. Like they wouldn't even get that in the classroom, in an actual in a face-to-face classroom setting. And so I feel like with not only they're disconnected from you, they're disconnected from their classmates, and by using Lumio and the interactive activities, they can all see each other in their, they're connected to you as well as their friends and other students by using Lumio.
Yeah. And like through the teams, they would be able to talk to each other, and you can see the drive and the want, but it's all text-based, and not all of it's the kids have to be, because the teachers are monitoring it and all that kind of stuff. So in order to be able to get actual learning,
nicely by far.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. No, not at all. And so in order to get actual learning from the kids, and all of the students, like I only had about 11 do it, but then again, I only had about 8 who were talking to me on Teams and doing the lesson at the same time. Everyone else had just jumped on the lesson, done it at their own pace at the time that I said that it was be running, and then left.
Yep.
So for me, I would never have gotten those kids to do it beforehand. And I also would never have gotten such, so like with that lesson, I have all that there sitting there waiting for me to be able to screenshot, print, put it in their books, done. And that way it's constant. It's So the kids said that they really loved it.
Awesome. Sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay. I keep talking over you. Am I correct in assuming that it also helps with your, with your workload with remote learning?
Yeah, look, our workload with remote learning, it's a lot of like being on Teams and talking to kids on Teams and putting up videos and posts each day, and try doing this today and try doing that today, and communicating with families as much as we can. In terms of running the lessons, we didn't have the technology to run actual lessons unless it was just a video lesson, because we didn't have the families with the technology. But now that there's an option, I don't know if it's going to ease the workload, but it's going to make lockdown feel less isolated. Like you still have to make the lessons and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, but in terms of like, for me, it would be, I still make the lessons and everything, but I would feel like I'm doing my job more than what I would sitting at home, not being able to do anything, only talking to my kids through a message on chats or on a Teams page, and that's it. Like I felt like I was being a teacher, and I was still.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I totally understand that. Totally get that. We use, for our Smart ANZ team, not in an education setting, we actually use Lumio in lockdown for our trivia and for our team meetings, and I guess we kind of do use it in an educational sense. And I actually do feel, and I found that before any of the lockdowns were happening, we would use it for trivia, like we'd have a trivia because we are a remote team. But I actually find that, when we go into a lockdown situation where we're not seeing each other as much face to face, because normally we see each other, even though we're remote, we still do see each other face to face regularly. And I do find that with Lumio, it's funny, I do find that we tend to use it more. We have a more regular trivia during lockdown, and we have our team meeting. And then we also meet like just once a week for a casual catch up. So we have like pretty much 2 extra catch ups, and we use Lumio for them. And I have to say that I do feel less isolated using Lumio. It's funny how that works.
Yeah,
and I feel
it's not even. Yeah, it's not like I could see the kids on Teams, but I guess I just felt like I was doing a lesson.
Yeah, you're interacting.
I'm actively engaging my kids in, And that being able to transfer it over to student pace makes it so much easier, because they can come in, they can do what they need to do. Or a lot of them hung around for a little bit and we're just like, this was really cool. Like, how's your day? What have you been cooking? Because I was like, chemistry, at home learning, cook with your families, kids. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, awesome. And I know the gamification element also helps a lot too.
They want more games.
The game. Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, I always think that too, because when we have our trivia, some people put in the gamification for some elements, and I'm always like, oh, I wish there was more. There's 1 or 2. I'm like, I could make the whole thing. Could gamify the whole thing. So yeah, that's cool. That's awesome to hear some of your real world feedback. That was great. No so you're off the hook. You're off the hook for the afternoon. So I'll quickly do a quick wrap up.
Did anyone have any questions? You did say someone had a question, or was it just?
Oh no, it was just my question. But people were leaving. There was no other questions came through. Just
cool.
That message from South Auckland. Thank you, awesome webinar. And then Maha also wrote, yes, what a great journey. Thank you, Toya. So yeah, just some comments.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Questions today. So we also do send out the recording, Toya, to all the registrants, because there was 20 registrants, so registration. So if I have any questions come through, I would certainly email you, and awesome. I will do a quick wrap up now. I'll take back the controls. Okay, so our Inspire Greatness Conference. The date actually has changed, and I've just realized I haven't updated this image yet, so please ignore the 10th of September, Friday, 10th of September. It is Friday the 3rd of December now. We are really, really hoping that our face-to-face goes through, because we've put so much into this, and we're so excited to bring it to everybody face-to-face, since we missed out on a face-to-face conference last year. So we're going to try our luck with postponing it to December. And I will have an updated image next week. I must have opened up an old file, and everyone who registered so far, or who has interacted with any of our Inspire Greatness emails that have gone out, you should have received a postpone announcement email last week. Okay, so that is Inspire Greatness. It is also offered virtually as well. If you go onto the homepage, I will also send out the link to this event in the email that goes out after this webinar. If you go onto the homepage, you can see the dates that it's offered virtually. We're planning. The plan is to offer all the content, so all the workshops that are going to be held live at the face-to-face. We're also asking those presenters to record them so we can upload them to Smart 360. And Smart 360 is our virtual event platform, which I'll actually going to go on to next after this slide. So it will be up. We're hoping to have all of the Inspire Greatness workshop recordings up on Smart 360 over the summer holidays, December, January. So you'll have lots of time to access the awesome content that will be a part of Inspire Greatness Conference 2021. and this is SMART 360. So I think you've all heard me before if you attend these webinars regularly, but SMART 360 is our virtual event platform. I have to say it is an awesome platform. I was actually a part of, so last year when all the lockdowns and the remote learning and remote events all started to happen because of COVID, we embarked on a journey of adopting a virtual event platform, and I was actually involved in the research stages of that, looking across, there was several other virtual event platforms we were looking at, and this one was by far the best one. It is a really rich virtual experience. It replicates the real world as much as possible, which is a bit freaky, but at the same time, it's awesome. It's like, it reminds me of Sims. Anyone who played Sims back in the 90s, it has a virtual exhibit hall, and if you go in there to the virtual exhibit hall, you will actually see, it's a really nice way to see SMART, the beast that is Smart Technologies. It breaks down, we've broken SMART down into different booths. So we have a gamification booth, an at-home educational and games booth. This is just an example of one. So you get an aerial view, and then you can click on the booths and it zooms in, and it's just a really nice way to see all the offerings and solutions that SMART offers. And we also have our ANZ booth, our Australian New Zealand booth, so you can come on there and say g'day. And that leads me to next week's webinars. So the 4th webinar down, it's just going so quickly, so we only have 2 more webinars left. So next week we've got top 10 tips to cater for different learning abilities, differentiation in the classroom, and that will be presented by Ben Pisani. Ben Pisani is coming back to present again for us. For those who have attended one of his webinars in the past, he usually presents at least once per term for us. So you all know that his webinars are awesome, super engaging, super inspiring content he always offers. So please come along to that next week. And then the last webinar of the term will actually be about the Inspire Greatness Conference and what is coming for that this year. The fundamentals in education is the theme, and we are also going to be having a strong focus on SEL, social emotional learning, and what it has been like for educators during remote learning these past 18 months. 20 months, I think it's been now. Yeah, so that leads me to the end of this webinar, and thank you again for everyone attending, and I will be back next week. Have a lovely evening, afternoon, morning and lunchtime to anyone listening to the recording. Great, thanks a lot everyone, and thanks again Toya if you're still on the line.
No worries, thank you.
Thanks.